Chapter 1. There is a quiet but powerful sentence in the second verse of the Isha Upanishad that changes the way we look at life. It says, in essence, that a human being should wish to live 100 years while continuing to perform actions in this world. At first glance, it may sound like a simple encouragement to live a long and active life. But hidden inside these few words is the foundation of what later became known as karma yoga, the path of spiritual growth through action. Many people carry a silent assumption in their minds. They believe that spirituality begins when life's activities end. They imagine that to move closer to truth, one must withdraw from the world, stop working, leave responsibilities behind, and sit somewhere in silence. According to this belief, daily life is a distraction, and spirituality is something separate from ordinary existence. But the wisdom of the Isha Upanishad quietly challenges this idea. It does not say, leave the world. It does not say, stop acting. It says the opposite, live fully, act continuously, and engage with life. This teaching feels surprisingly modern, even though it is thousands of years old. The verse suggests that action itself is not the problem. Work is not the obstacle to spiritual freedom. In fact, work is part of the natural design of life. Just as the wind moves, rivers flow, and the sun shines without stopping, human beings are also meant to act. Think about a small child. A child does not sit quietly all day trying to become spiritual. The child runs, explores, builds things, asks questions, and learns through activity. There is movement, curiosity, and energy. Life itself expresses through action. The Upanishad reminds us that this energy is not something to suppress. It is something to understand. What creates inner disturbance is not action itself, but the way we attach our identity to the results of action. A person works and immediately starts thinking, what will I gain from this? Will people praise me? Will I succeed? What if I fail? Slowly, action becomes heavy. It becomes tied to anxiety, expectation, and fear. But the deeper message of the verse suggests something very different. It says that a human being can remain active for an entire lifetime, even 100 years, and still remain inwardly free. The key lies not in abandoning action, but in changing the relationship with action. This is the subtle beginning of karma yoga. Action continues, but the inner clinging slowly dissolves. A person still performs duties. One still works, helps others, builds things, creates ideas, and participates in society. But inside, there is less obsession with ownership. The action flows through the person rather than being possessed by the person. Imagine a musician playing a beautiful instrument. When the musician becomes completely absorbed in the music, something interesting happens. The sense of I am performing fades away. There is only music happening. The musician becomes a medium for the melody. In a similar way, the Upanishadic insight suggests that human life can become a flow of action without the constant pressure of ego. But here a natural question arises. If actions are allowed, even encouraged, then what about spiritual freedom? Wouldn't constant activity trap a person deeper into worldly involvement? This is where the wisdom becomes very subtle. The verse implies that the soul, the deepest core of a person, is already free by nature. Its freedom does not depend on inactivity. Just as the sky is not disturbed by the clouds moving through it, the inner self remains untouched by actions. The real problem begins only when we start identifying ourselves with the clouds. So the teaching is not about stopping clouds. It is about remembering the sky. Many people misunderstand spirituality because they think freedom means escaping life. But the Upanishadic vision suggests something far more beautiful. Freedom can exist right in the middle of life. A farmer working in the field, a mother taking care of a child, a teacher guiding students, or a craftsman shaping wood. All these actions can become part of the spiritual path if they are performed with the right understanding. The work does not need to disappear. The ego within the work slowly softens. Pause for a moment and think about your own day. How many actions do you perform daily? You wake up, brush your teeth, prepare food, speak to people, solve problems, make decisions, and complete tasks. Life moves through hundreds of small actions. Now imagine if every one of those actions carried the weight of anxiety, worrying about outcomes, approval, or recognition. Naturally, the mind becomes tired. But what if some of those actions were done simply because they are part of life? Not to prove something, not to control everything, just to participate in existence. Wouldn't life feel lighter? There is a small story often told in spiritual traditions. A monk once visited a village where he saw an old woman drawing water from a well. She did this every day for many years. Someone asked her if she ever felt bored doing the same work daily. The woman smiled and said, "The water changes every moment, the sky above changes every moment, and the breath inside me changes every moment. Only the rope looks the same." In that simple moment, she revealed something profound. The action was ordinary, but her awareness was alive. This is the spirit behind the teaching of the Isha Upanishad. Karma yoga is not about dramatic renunciation. It is about a quiet shift in awareness while living a completely normal life. Another misunderstanding often appears here. Some people think that acting without attachment means becoming careless or indifferent. They assume that if one does not cling to results, then work will become lazy or half-hearted. But the Upanishadic idea suggests the opposite. When attachment reduces, attention actually becomes sharper. Instead of worrying about results, the mind becomes fully present in the action itself. A gardener who truly enjoys planting seeds does not keep digging them up to check whether they have grown. The gardener simply takes care of the soil, the water, and the sunlight. Growth happens naturally. In the same way, Karma yoga teaches a person to care deeply about the action, but relax about the outcome. This small change transforms the quality of life. Work stops being a burden. It becomes a form of participation in the cosmic rhythm. Even ancient commentators and philosophers who reflected on the Isha Upanishad emphasized that human life is not meant to be passive. The world itself is a field of learning. Every relationship, every responsibility, and every challenge becomes an opportunity to understand oneself more deeply. Life itself becomes the teacher. Have you ever noticed how some people seem peaceful even while handling many responsibilities? They work, manage families, and deal with difficulties, yet there is a calmness in their presence. Their secret is not that they have less work. Their secret is that they are less internally entangled with their work. The actions happen, but the mind does not become imprisoned by them. This is the quiet wisdom the second verse points toward. A human being can live a full life, even 100 years, filled with action, creativity, service, and responsibility, and yet remain inwardly untouched. Not because they ran away from life, but because they understood how to live within it. Perhaps the real invitation of this verse is very gentle. Instead of asking us to abandon the world, it asks us to look at our daily actions with fresh eyes, to work sincerely but lightly, to act fully but without inner chains, to participate in life without losing ourselves inside it. And slowly, almost quietly, something begins to shift. The same work continues. The same world continues. But the heart becomes spacious. Action flows, yet the inner sky remains clear. And in that quiet clarity, life itself begins to feel like a form of meditation. Chapter 2. The ancient wisdom of the Isha Upanishad says that a human being should wish to live for 100 years while performing their duties in this world. At first glance, this may sound like an ordinary statement. Many people already wish to live long lives. But the meaning here is deeper and more subtle. It is not about clinging to life out of fear. It is not about trying to escape death. Instead, it is about accepting life fully and living it with awareness, responsibility, and quiet joy. According to the vision of the Isha Upanishad, the world is not a mistake and the body is not a punishment. Everything is seen as part of a sacred presence. Life itself is a field where something meaningful can unfold. When the text speaks about wishing to live 100 years, it is pointing toward the idea of completing one's journey properly. Just as a seed takes time to become a tree, a human life also needs time to mature. Experiences, relationships, struggles, and small realizations slowly shape the inner world of a person. In ancient Indian thought, 100 years symbolized the full natural span of human life. It was not meant to be a rigid number. Rather, it represented completeness. The message was simple. Do not run away from life, and do not waste it either. Accept the time given to you and live it in a meaningful way. Many people misunderstand spiritual teachings. They think spirituality means rejecting the world, escaping responsibilities, or becoming indifferent to everyday life. But the message of the Isha Upanishad moves in the opposite direction. It tells us that living and acting in the world is not a problem when done with the right understanding. Duties are not chains if they are performed with clarity and sincerity. Think of a theater actor for a moment. The actor knows that the stage, the costume, and the role are temporary. Still, the actor does not walk away from the stage halfway through the play. Instead, they perform their role with dedication until the final curtain falls. Life can be seen in a similar way. The ancient sages were suggesting that once we understand the nature of existence, we should still continue playing our role fully. In simple terms, wishing to live 100 years means saying yes to the experience of life. It is a quiet acceptance of the opportunity given by existence. But here is an interesting question to pause with for a moment. If someone suddenly told you that you will live exactly 100 years, how would that change the way you live today? Would you rush through your days in stress and worry? Or would you begin to notice small moments more carefully? The morning sunlight entering your room, the sound of a bird outside the window, the quiet satisfaction of completing a simple task. Many spiritual teachings in India remind us that life is not only about reaching some distant goal. It is also about participating in the present moment with awareness. There is a small story often told in spiritual circles. A young seeker once went to a wise teacher and said, "I feel tired of the world. I want to renounce everything and leave." The teacher listened quietly and then asked a simple question. "Have you finished the responsibilities that life has given you?" The young man paused. He realized he had not. The teacher gently said, "Then complete them with awareness. Running away is not freedom." The wisdom behind wishing for a full life comes from this understanding. Life itself is a process of unfolding. When we try to escape it too early, we interrupt that process. Another misunderstanding appears in the opposite direction. Some people believe that living long means accumulating more pleasures, more possessions, and more control. But that is not what the teaching suggests. The idea is not about stretching life outward. It is about deepening it inward. Living 100 years in the spirit of the Isha Upanishad means living with balance. Work is done, but it does not consume the soul. Relationships are honored, but they do not become chains. Wealth may come and go, but the heart remains steady. This teaching quietly reminds us that life becomes heavy when we cling to things too tightly. When we begin to see life as a temporary role rather than permanent ownership, something changes inside. The pressure reduces. The mind becomes lighter. In many ways, the desire to live 100 years is actually a statement of inner courage. It means a person is not afraid of life's ups and downs. They are willing to experience the full range of existence: joy, sorrow, success, failure, love, loss. All of it becomes part of the journey. There is another beautiful way to understand this idea. Imagine a farmer planting seeds at the beginning of the season. The farmer does not expect the crop to grow overnight. There is patience involved. The soil must be cared for. Water must be given. Time must pass. Slowly the plant grows, flowers appear, and eventually fruits arrive. Human life follows a similar rhythm. Wisdom, compassion, and understanding do not appear instantly. They grow slowly through the seasons of life. So the ancient sages were saying something very simple. Give life the time it needs to bloom. Let us pause again with a small reflection. Think about the elderly people you have known in your life. Perhaps a grandparent or an old neighbor. Often, after many decades of living, a certain softness appears in their personality. They begin to see life differently. Things that once felt urgent no longer seem so important. There is a calmness that comes from having lived through many storms. Maybe that is one of the hidden reasons behind this teaching. Life itself becomes a teacher, but only if we stay long enough to learn from it. The aspiration for a 100-year life is therefore not about counting years. It is about allowing life to complete its natural cycle. When lived with awareness, each decade adds something valuable to the human heart. Gradually, a person begins to see that every experience carries a quiet lesson. Success teaches confidence. Failure teaches humility. Love teaches openness. Loss teaches depth. And slowly, almost without noticing, the human being becomes more complete. In the end, the message of the Isha Upanishad is very gentle. Life is not something to escape from, and it is not something to possess either. It is something to participate in. When a person lives with this understanding, the desire to live a full life becomes natural. Not out of fear, not out of greed, but out of gratitude. It becomes like watching a beautiful sunset. One does not rush it. One simply stays present until the last color fades into the evening sky. In the same quiet way, a wise person lives their days, fully present, fulfilling their role, and allowing the story of life to reach its natural and graceful ending. Chapter 3. Isha Upanishad speaks about something that almost everyone struggles with: how to live fully in the world without becoming mentally trapped by the world. In simple words, it asks a quiet but powerful question. Can a person act, work, earn, build relationships, and still remain inwardly free? Most people believe that spirituality means running away from action. They imagine that peace belongs only to monks sitting in caves or sages living in forests. But the wisdom of the Isha Upanishad turns this idea upside down. It says that the real secret is not escaping action. The real secret is learning how to act without becoming attached to the action. The text begins with a profound vision of life. It suggests that everything in this universe is pervaded by a deeper divine presence. Nothing truly belongs to us. Not our possessions, not our achievements, not even the body through which we act. Everything is part of a vast cosmic flow. When this understanding slowly sinks into the heart, something very interesting begins to change inside a person. Normally, we act with a strong feeling of I am the doer. I built this. I earned this. This success is mine. This failure is mine. This constant sense of personal ownership quietly creates tension. It makes every action heavy. Every result becomes a matter of pride or fear. Success inflates the ego, and failure wounds it. Slowly the mind becomes tired because it is carrying too much psychological weight. The Isha Upanishad offers a surprisingly simple shift in perspective. It teaches a principle often expressed as enjoy through renunciation. At first this sounds confusing. How can renunciation bring enjoyment? Most people think renunciation means losing things. But here it means something different. It means letting go of the idea that everything belongs to me. Imagine watching a beautiful sunset. You enjoy it deeply, but you do not feel the need to own the sunset. The joy comes from experiencing it, not possessing it. In the same way, the Upanishad suggests that life can be lived fully without the constant mental claim of mine and thine. When a person begins to see life this way, action becomes lighter. Work continues. Responsibilities continue. But something inside relaxes. Because now the person begins to feel that the energy behind every action is not entirely personal. The strength to think, move, speak, and create is itself part of a greater intelligence flowing through life. In that sense, the human being becomes less like a controller and more like an instrument. And strangely, this realization does not weaken action. It actually makes action clearer and calmer. But here is an important point that people often misunderstand. Detachment does not mean laziness. It does not mean carelessness. And it certainly does not mean emotional coldness. Detachment simply means that while performing the action wholeheartedly, the mind does not cling to the result as a matter of personal identity. A farmer can plant seeds with great dedication, but he also understands that rain, sunlight, and countless natural forces are involved in the harvest. He does his part sincerely, yet he does not torture himself trying to control the entire universe. The Isha Upanishad invites us to live life with that same inner wisdom. Now pause for a moment and look at your own daily life. Think about the last time something did not go according to your expectations. Maybe a project failed, someone misunderstood you, or a plan collapsed. Notice how quickly the mind turns that situation into a personal burden. The thought appears, why did this happen to me? But what if the mind could simply say, I did my part sincerely. The rest belongs to the larger flow of life. Would the heart feel a little lighter? This is the quiet freedom the Upanishad is pointing toward. There is a small story often shared in spiritual circles. A temple sculptor was once carving a stone statue. Someone asked him, how do you create such beautiful forms? The sculptor smiled and replied, I do not create them. The form is already inside the stone. I simply remove what is unnecessary. In a similar way, the secret of detachment slowly removes unnecessary psychological weight from our actions. The work remains, but the burden disappears. Another beautiful insight from the Isha Upanishad is that true enjoyment actually becomes deeper when attachment reduces. Think about how attachment behaves in ordinary life. When we become too attached to something, a possession, a position, or even a relationship, fear immediately enters the mind. Fear of losing it, fear of change, fear of failure. Attachment promises happiness, but it secretly creates anxiety. Detachment does the opposite. It removes the fear of loss. When fear disappears, the mind becomes calm enough to truly enjoy the present moment. Imagine holding sand tightly in your fist. The harder you grip, the more sand slips away. But if your palm remains open, the sand rests gently. Life works in a very similar way. The Upanishadic vision does not ask us to stop living. It simply asks us to loosen the grip. After all, look at how nature itself functions. The sun shines without claiming credit. Rivers flow without announcing ownership of the land they nourish. Trees offer shade and fruit without demanding recognition. There is action everywhere in nature, yet there is no ego claiming the results. In a way, the Isha Upanishad invites human beings to rediscover that same natural rhythm of action. Work sincerely. Give your best effort. But inwardly remember that the deeper energy moving life is not limited to the individual self. Here is a small everyday example. Imagine a mother cooking for her family. She chops vegetables, stirs the pot, serves the meal. If she constantly keeps thinking, "No one appreciates me. This is my sacrifice," the work becomes emotionally exhausting. But if she simply cooks with a quiet sense of love and participation in life, the same activity becomes peaceful. The action did not change. Only the inner attitude changed. And that is exactly the secret the Isha Upanishad whispers to the human heart. Act fully. Live fully. But do not imprison yourself with the idea that everything depends on your personal control. As this understanding slowly matures, something beautiful happens. The mind begins to move through life with a strange combination of involvement and freedom. You care deeply about what you do, yet you are not crushed by outcomes. You participate in the world, yet you are not psychologically trapped by it. In the middle of busy life, a quiet space of calm begins to grow inside. And perhaps this is why the ancient seers saw detachment not as a dry discipline, but as a doorway to a freer way of enjoying life. Because when the mind stops clinging to every result, it finally has the energy to simply experience life as it unfolds. The work continues. The responsibilities remain. The world keeps moving. But deep inside, there is a gentle realization. Life was never meant to be carried like a heavy burden. It was meant to be lived like a sacred participation in something far greater than ourselves. Chapter 4. In the ancient wisdom of the Isha Upanishad, there is an idea about how human beings can live freely in this world. It speaks about something called nishkama karma, action without selfish desire. At first glance, this idea sounds mysterious, but when understood slowly, it becomes deeply practical. It is not about escaping life, avoiding work, or withdrawing from responsibilities. Instead, it shows a way to live fully, act sincerely, and yet remain inwardly free. Most people believe that actions bind us. We think that whatever we do creates consequences, and those consequences return to us like chains around our lives. If we hurt someone, we feel guilt. If we help someone, we expect gratitude. If we work hard, we hope for success. Life becomes a constant exchange of expectations. Because of this, every action carries a hidden tension. There is always a quiet voice inside asking, "What will I get from this?" But the wisdom of the Isha Upanishad gently shifts this perspective. It suggests that actions themselves do not bind a person. What actually binds us is the desire behind the action. When we act with attachment to results, the mind becomes tied to outcomes. The moment the result appears, our emotions rise or fall. Success makes us proud. Failure makes us bitter. Praise excites us. Criticism hurts us. Slowly, the mind becomes trapped in a cycle of reaction. Nishkama karma offers a quiet freedom from this cycle. It says that a person can act fully in the world, but without being mentally trapped by the results. This does not mean becoming careless or indifferent. In fact, it means doing one's work with even greater sincerity. But the inner attitude changes. The action is done because it is the right thing to do, not because it will bring a reward. Imagine a mother caring for her child in the middle of the night. The child wakes up crying. The mother gets up, comforts the child, and sits quietly until the child falls asleep again. She does not expect applause. She does not think about receiving something in return. The action flows naturally from love and responsibility. Because there is no selfish expectation, there is also no inner burden. This is the spirit of Nishkama karma. The ancient seers who reflected on the Isha Upanishad believed that when action arises without ego and without craving, it leaves no stain on the mind. The action happens, the moment passes, and the mind remains light and clear. But many people misunderstand this idea. Some think desireless action means suppressing ambition or refusing success. Others assume it means becoming passive or detached from life. This is not what the teaching suggests. Nishkama karma does not ask a person to stop acting. It only asks a person to stop clinging. You can still work hard. You can still pursue your goals. You can still care deeply about what you do. But inside, there is a quiet understanding that the result is not entirely in your control. You give your best effort, but you allow life to unfold as it will. This simple shift changes the entire experience of life. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on something very ordinary. Think about a time when you helped someone without expecting anything in return. Maybe you guided a stranger who was lost. Maybe you shared your knowledge with a colleague. Maybe you simply listened to a friend who needed support. When the moment ended, how did you feel? Most people notice something interesting. Instead of feeling drained, they feel lighter. There is a quiet satisfaction that does not depend on recognition. The mind does not replay the event with expectations. It simply rests. That lightness is a small glimpse of what Nishkama karma feels like. The teachings associated with the Isha Upanishad also suggest another beautiful insight. They say that the deeper self within us is not really the doer of actions. The soul, in its pure state, is like a silent witness. Nature performs the activities of the body and mind. Thoughts arise, actions happen, life moves forward, but the deeper consciousness simply observes. When a person begins to understand this inwardly, something remarkable happens. The heavy sense of, I am the one controlling everything slowly dissolves. Life becomes less of a struggle and more of a participation. An old story from the spiritual traditions of India illustrates this idea beautifully. A humble temple gardener spent his days watering plants and sweeping fallen leaves. Visitors rarely noticed him. One day a traveler asked him, "Do you ever feel disappointed that no one appreciates your work?" The gardener smiled gently and replied, "These flowers bloom for the sun, not for praise. I only help them grow." There was no bitterness in his voice, only quiet contentment. That is the fragrance of Nishkama karma. It is important to understand that freedom from bondage does not mean escaping the world. The ancient teachings describe something even more beautiful, a person who becomes free while still living and working in the world. Such a person is sometimes described as a Jivan Mukta, someone who moves through life with inner freedom. This freedom is subtle. Outwardly, nothing dramatic changes. The person still works, still faces challenges, still participates in society. But inwardly there is spaciousness. Success does not inflate the ego. Failure does not crush the spirit. The mind remains balanced because it is no longer chained to outcomes. Think about the stress many people carry today. A student studies not only to learn, but also to secure approval. An employee works not only to contribute, but also to constantly prove their worth. Even simple acts of kindness sometimes hide a silent expectation of recognition. No wonder the mind becomes tired. Nishkama karma gently loosens this tension. It reminds us that life can be lived with sincerity, but without constant psychological pressure. A small everyday example can make this clearer. Imagine two people planting trees in a garden. One person plants the tree while constantly thinking about how much praise they will receive when the garden becomes beautiful. The other person plants the tree simply because planting trees feels meaningful. Years later, when the tree grows, both may see the same result. But their inner experience along the way was completely different. One carried expectation, the other carried peace. So perhaps a simple question can quietly arise within us. What would life feel like if actions were done with full care, but without the constant demand for reward? The wisdom of the Isha Upanishad does not force an answer. It simply invites exploration. Gradually, a person who practices this attitude begins to notice subtle changes. The mind becomes less reactive. Jealousy weakens. Comparison loses its grip. Work becomes more focused because attention is not scattered in worrying about results. And slowly, a quiet joy appears. A steady contentment that flows from within. In that state, action continues, life continues, relationships continue. But the invisible chains of expectation begin to fall away. Then something very simple yet profound becomes clear. Freedom was never somewhere else. It was hidden inside the way we acted all along. Chapter 5. There is a powerful warning hidden inside the ancient wisdom of the Isha Upanishad. It appears in one short verse, but the idea behind it is profound and deeply human. The verse says that those who are slayers of their own soul move towards sunless worlds covered in blind darkness. Ancienttexts.org. At first glance, this statement may sound frightening or mysterious. It almost feels like a threat about punishment after death. But when we look carefully at the deeper meaning, something much more subtle and psychological appears. The ancient sages were not merely describing a physical place somewhere in the universe. They were describing a condition of life, a state of inner darkness where a person loses touch with the light within. The Upanishads often use light and darkness as symbols. Light represents awareness, clarity, and truth. Darkness represents confusion, ignorance, and forgetfulness of our deeper nature. So when the text speaks about sunless worlds, it is pointing to a life where the inner light of understanding has disappeared. Radha Krishna Temple. But what does it mean to slay the soul? This phrase can easily be misunderstood. The soul, according to the Upanishads, cannot actually be destroyed. It is eternal. The real meaning is more psychological and spiritual. To kill the soul means to live in a way that completely ignores the deeper spirit within us. Arun Singha. It is like covering a bright lamp with thick cloth again and again until the room becomes dark. The lamp is still there, but its light is hidden. In everyday life, this happens slowly. It rarely happens in one dramatic moment. Instead, it happens through small choices repeated again and again. When a person becomes completely absorbed in ego, comparison, greed, or endless craving for possessions, the awareness of something deeper slowly fades. Life becomes mechanical. The person may appear successful on the outside, but inside there is restlessness, dissatisfaction, and quiet emptiness. The Upanishadic sages observed this long ago. They saw that human beings often run endlessly after pleasure, recognition, or control, thinking that these things will bring fulfillment. But the more one chases them, the more the mind becomes entangled in desire. It is like running on a treadmill. There is movement, but no real progress. Radha Krishna Temple. And slowly, without noticing, the person forgets the simplest truth, that life is not only about collecting experiences or possessions. There is also an inner presence, a silent awareness that gives meaning to everything. When that awareness is ignored for too long, a strange kind of darkness enters life. Not physical darkness, but emotional and spiritual darkness. Confusion increases. Relationships feel shallow. Success no longer feels satisfying. Even moments of pleasure leave a strange aftertaste of emptiness. This is what the ancient text describes as entering sunless worlds. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself something very simple. Have you ever met someone who seems to have everything, wealth, comfort, status, and yet carries a deep sense of dissatisfaction? Or perhaps you have felt it yourself during certain periods of life. Everything externally looks fine, but internally something feels disconnected. That quiet disconnection is exactly what the sages were warning about. It is not that material things are evil. The Isha Upanishad never says we must run away from the world. In fact, earlier verses encourage living fully and performing one's duties in life. The real danger is forgetfulness, forgetting that behind all actions and achievements there is a deeper consciousness that gives life its meaning. Uttarakhand Open University. When that remembrance disappears, life becomes heavy and mechanical. There is also another interpretation hidden in the teaching. The phrase slayers of the soul can also refer to physical self-destruction, when someone ends their life in despair. The sages did not describe this act with anger or condemnation. Instead, they described it with deep compassion and understanding. From their perspective, suicide is not a true escape from suffering. It is more like leaving a difficult classroom before the lesson is finished. The confusion that caused the pain is still unresolved, and therefore the inner darkness remains. The wisdom of the Upanishads suggests something very different. Instead of escaping life, one must slowly learn to see life differently. The problems of life are not punishments. They are teachers. The disappointments we face often push us inward. They force us to ask deeper questions. Who am I really? Why am I here? What truly brings peace? Many saints in the Hindu tradition discovered their spiritual path precisely during moments of inner crisis. When the outer world stopped satisfying them, they turned inward and discovered something astonishing, a quiet, luminous awareness that had always been present. Once this awareness begins to shine, the darkness gradually disappears. Think of a simple example from daily life. Imagine sitting in a completely dark room at night. You might feel uneasy, even afraid. But the moment a small lamp is switched on, the darkness disappears instantly. The darkness never had any independent existence. It was only the absence of light. In the same way, the sunless worlds described in the Upanishad are nothing but the absence of inner awareness. The solution is not complicated philosophy. It begins with simple attention to life. Moments of silence. A few minutes of sincere reflection. Acts of kindness done without expectation. A quiet awareness of breath. These small practices slowly remove the coverings around the inner light. There is a beautiful story told in many Hindu traditions about a traveler who spent years searching for treasure across distant lands. After decades of struggle, he returned home tired and disappointed. One day, while repairing the floor of his own house, he discovered a hidden box of gold buried beneath it. The treasure had always been there. The journey was necessary only to realize where to look. The sages of the Isha Upanishad were pointing toward the same discovery. The soul does not need to be created, improved, or achieved. It is already present as the silent witness of every experience. The real danger is simply forgetting it. When awareness turns outward all the time, the world appears fragmented and confusing. But when awareness gently turns inward, even for a few quiet moments, something changes. Life begins to feel connected again. Ordinary experiences regain depth and meaning. The sunlight slowly returns. And then the warning of the Upanishad reveals its deeper compassion. It is not trying to frighten us with darkness. It is reminding us of the value of our inner light. Because once that light is remembered, the idea of sunless worlds disappears completely. The same life that once felt heavy begins to glow with quiet clarity. And in that quiet clarity, the soul, which was never truly lost, is simply recognized again. Chapter 6. The ancient wisdom of the Isha Upanishad says that the deepest truth of existence is unity. Not unity as an idea in philosophy, but unity as a living experience. The text gently points toward a vision in which a person begins to see all beings inside oneself and oneself inside all beings. When this vision arises, life changes quietly but completely. At first, this idea may sound mystical or distant, but if we slow down and think about it, it actually speaks to something very human. Most of our suffering comes from the feeling that we are separate and alone. We feel that others are different from us, sometimes even opposed to us. Because of this separation, fear grows. Competition grows. Anger grows. We protect ourselves constantly, as if the world is full of strangers. The Isha Upanishad challenges this way of seeing. It says that the same life that beats in your heart also moves through every other being. The same consciousness that looks through your eyes is also looking through countless other eyes. When a person truly begins to see this, something very beautiful happens. The heart becomes softer. The mind becomes quieter. Life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a shared journey. This is where karma yoga, the path of action, becomes deeply connected with this unity vision. Karma yoga is not simply about doing work or fulfilling duties. People often misunderstand it in this way. Some think it means working endlessly without caring about results. Others think it means sacrificing personal happiness. But the deeper meaning is much simpler. When you begin to see others as part of yourself, your actions naturally become caring and compassionate. Helping another person no longer feels like a burden. It feels almost like helping your own hand when it is injured. When your right hand helps your left hand, there is no pride. There is no expectation. There is simply a natural movement toward harmony. The unity vision described in the Isha Upanishad creates this same natural feeling in everyday life. Work then becomes an expression of love. Not dramatic love, not emotional excitement, but a quiet, steady care for the world around you. You cook food for your family. You speak kindly to a stranger. You protect a tree. You forgive someone who made a mistake. These small actions begin to carry a deeper meaning. They are no longer separate acts. They become part of a larger flow of life caring for itself. And something surprising begins to happen inside the person who lives this way. Fear slowly fades. If everything is connected, then the sharp boundary between me and others becomes softer. Losing something does not feel as devastating. Winning something does not feel overwhelmingly important. Life becomes balanced. The Upanishadic teaching suggests that when this unity vision arises, a person shrinks not thereafter from anything. In simple language, this means that hatred, disgust, and deep fear begin to dissolve. You cannot truly hate someone if you see your own life reflected in them. But reaching this understanding does not always happen suddenly. It grows slowly, like a seed inside the heart. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on a simple question. Have you ever noticed how naturally empathy arises in certain moments? Imagine walking on a quiet road early in the morning. You see an old man struggling to lift something heavy. For a moment you feel an inner pull to help him. That feeling does not come from logic. It comes from a deeper connection. For a brief moment, his difficulty feels like your own. The unity vision described in the Isha Upanishad is like expanding that moment of empathy to the whole of life. It is not forced kindness. It is a natural recognition. Sometimes small spiritual stories from Hindu tradition illustrate this beautifully. There is a simple tale often told about a wandering monk who was once seen feeding a hungry dog before eating his own food. When someone asked why he cared so much for an animal, the monk quietly replied that the same life that felt hunger in the dog also felt hunger in him. This is not poetry. It is a way of seeing. When this understanding becomes stable, karma yoga becomes effortless. However, there is another misunderstanding people often carry. Some believe that seeing unity means ignoring differences in the world. They think it means pretending that injustice or conflict does not exist. But the teaching does not say that. Seeing unity does not make a person passive. In fact, it often makes a person more responsible. When you feel connected to everything, you naturally want to reduce suffering wherever you see it. If a tree is being cut unnecessarily, you feel concern. If someone is treated unfairly, you feel the urge to stand for justice. The difference is that these actions no longer come from anger or ego. They come from clarity. The unity vision allows action without hatred. This is the quiet beauty of karma yoga. You act in the world fully, but your heart remains peaceful because your actions are not driven by personal gain or personal fear. Think about a very ordinary situation. A parent wakes up early every day to prepare food for the family. The parent may feel tired, but still does the work. Why? Because love is present. The action does not feel meaningless. Now imagine that same feeling slowly extending beyond the family to society, to nature, and to all living beings. That is the spirit of karma yoga inspired by the unity vision. And the interesting thing is that when people begin to live this way, inner peace arises naturally. Not because life becomes easy, but because the constant feeling of isolation disappears. The Upanishadic wisdom suggests that the real suffering of human life comes from the illusion that we are separate islands. When that illusion softens, life begins to feel lighter. But this does not mean a person becomes perfect overnight. The mind still becomes angry sometimes. The ego still reacts. The difference is that awareness slowly grows. A person begins to notice these reactions more quickly. The heart gently returns to the feeling of connection. Another small reflection may help here. Have you ever stood near the ocean and watched the waves? Each wave appears separate for a moment. One wave rises higher, another falls sooner. But in truth, every wave is simply the ocean moving in different forms. Human beings are very similar. Our personalities, cultures, and experiences make us appear separate. But beneath those differences, the same life flows through everyone. The unity vision of the Isha Upanishad is simply the recognition of this deeper ocean. When a person lives with this understanding, karma yoga becomes a joyful path. Work continues. Life continues. Responsibilities continue. But the inner burden slowly disappears. You are no longer working only for yourself. You are participating in the movement of life itself. And strangely, this way of living brings a quiet happiness that does not depend on success or failure. In that calm understanding, action becomes love, service becomes natural, and life itself begins to feel like a shared breath moving through the entire universe. Chapter 7. There is a quiet but powerful warning hidden inside the ancient wisdom of the Isha Upanishad. It speaks about something that many spiritual seekers misunderstand even today. The text does not only warn against ignorance or excessive attachment to the material world. Surprisingly, it also warns against something that appears spiritual on the surface, complete inaction. At first, this sounds confusing. Many people imagine that spirituality means withdrawing from the world. They believe that if they stop participating in life, stop working, stop engaging with responsibilities, then they will somehow move closer to truth. The mind creates a romantic image of a silent person sitting under a tree, doing nothing, untouched by the world. But the wisdom of the ancient seers challenges this idea directly. The teaching suggests that escaping action is not freedom. In fact, the Upanishadic sages describe this path as a movement into darkness. Not darkness as punishment, but darkness as confusion, a place where the seeker becomes disconnected from the natural flow of life. Why would doing nothing lead to darkness? Because life itself is movement. Nature never stops acting. The wind moves, rivers flow, the heart beats, thoughts arise, seasons change. Even when a person sits still physically, the mind continues its endless activity. Desires, memories, fears, and fantasies keep running inside like an invisible river. So the problem is not action itself. The problem is our relationship with action. The sages of the Vedas understood something subtle about human nature. They observed that if a person runs blindly into worldly activity, chasing pleasure, power, and recognition, the mind becomes restless and trapped. But they also saw the opposite mistake. When someone rejects life completely and refuses to act, believing that inactivity is spiritual purity. Both extremes create imbalance. One is excessive involvement. The other is fear of involvement. And the Upanishadic insight says that both can keep a person far away from real understanding. The idea of the penalty of inaction is not a moral punishment. It is simply a natural consequence. When someone tries to escape life instead of understanding it, the mind does not become free. It only becomes more tangled. Imagine a person who stops working and isolates himself in the name of spirituality. At first, it may feel peaceful. There are no responsibilities, no deadlines, no social expectations. But after some time, something strange begins to happen. The mind starts creating its own dramas. Small thoughts become big worries. Old memories return. Imaginary problems appear. Because the outer world was not the real source of disturbance. The disturbance was inside. And when outer action stops, the inner noise sometimes becomes even louder. This is why the Upanishadic wisdom suggests something very balanced. It encourages a life where action continues, but attachment slowly dissolves. Work is done, responsibilities are fulfilled, but the heart remains light. The difference may look small from outside, but internally it changes everything. A person who is attached to action believes, my identity depends on what I achieve. But a person who understands the teaching begins to act like a participant in a larger play. Actions happen, but the ego slowly relaxes its grip. And this creates a surprising kind of freedom. Instead of escaping life, one begins to move through life with awareness. At this point, it is worth pausing and asking a gentle question. Have you ever noticed how sometimes avoiding a task actually creates more mental stress than doing it? A simple daily example makes this very clear. Imagine someone who has an important phone call to make. They delay it again and again. Hours pass. The mind keeps thinking about it. The tension grows. But the moment the call is finally made, the mind suddenly becomes lighter. Nothing magical happened. Action simply restored balance. In the same way, avoiding the responsibilities of life does not make the mind free. Often it only makes the mind more restless. There is an old spiritual story told in many Indian traditions. A young seeker once approached a wise teacher and asked for the highest spiritual path. The teacher listened quietly and then asked a simple question. "Do you help your family at home?" The young man replied proudly, "No. I avoid all worldly duties so that I can meditate all day." The teacher smiled gently and said, "Then your meditation is not yet complete. First, learn to serve life without pride or resistance. Meditation will deepen naturally." The point of the story is not about duty alone. It reveals something deeper. Spirituality is not an escape from life. It is a transformation of how we live it. Many people misunderstand meditation and knowledge as an excuse to disconnect from the world. But the teaching associated with the Isha Upanishad suggests that focusing only on inner silence while ignoring the living world can create another kind of blindness. Because the same sacred reality that exists in meditation also exists in action. It exists in work, relationships, creativity, and even simple daily tasks. If someone rejects all of these completely, they may unknowingly reject the very field where awareness can grow. This is why the ancient teaching sometimes says that those who chase only knowledge without engaging life may enter an even deeper darkness. Not because knowledge is wrong, but because knowledge without participation becomes incomplete. Real understanding blossoms when insight and life move together. Action becomes a form of expression rather than a burden. Work becomes service rather than competition. And slowly the mind realizes something beautiful. Freedom is not somewhere far away. It can appear in the middle of ordinary life. Think of a river. If the river stops flowing, it becomes stagnant. The water loses freshness. But when it flows naturally, it remains clear and alive. Human life is very similar. When we flow with life consciously, we grow. When we try to freeze life in the name of spiritual purity, something inside becomes rigid. The wisdom of the Isha Upanishad gently reminds us that the goal is not to stop the river of life. The goal is to flow through it without drowning in it. This understanding slowly removes a deep fear many seekers carry. They worry that worldly activity will automatically destroy spiritual awareness. But the ancient insight says the opposite is possible. Awareness can deepen within action. A parent caring for a child, a teacher guiding students, a farmer working in the field, or a worker performing daily duties. All of them can discover moments of deep presence if the mind is not obsessed with personal gain. In this sense, life itself becomes a meditation hall. Every action becomes an opportunity to watch the mind. Every responsibility becomes a place where ego can soften. And slowly the person realizes that true freedom was never about escaping action. It was about acting without inner bondage. Chapter 8. When people hear the word spirituality, they often imagine someone leaving the world behind, walking into forests, sitting in caves, or abandoning family and work. But the wisdom of the ancient text Isha Upanishad quietly challenges this idea. It presents something surprisingly simple and deeply human. Life itself is the path. The home, the family, the daily responsibilities. These are not obstacles to spiritual growth. They are the very ground where spiritual understanding can blossom. One of the most meaningful ideas from this Upanishad is the teaching that a person should wish to live a full life of 100 years while performing their duties. At first glance, this may sound like a simple blessing for longevity, but the deeper message is much richer. It suggests that living fully in the world, working, caring for family, contributing to society, is not separate from spiritual life. In fact, it is the natural beginning of it. In traditional Indian thought, life is often described through 4 stages, and one of the most important is the householder stage, often called the grihastha ashrama. This is the period when a person builds a family, earns a livelihood, and participates in society. Many people assume that spirituality only begins after this stage ends, but the wisdom of the Upanishads hints at the opposite. The householder stage is not a distraction from truth. It is a training ground for it. Think about daily life for a moment. A parent waking early to prepare food for the family. Someone working long hours to support loved ones. A person helping neighbors or caring for aging parents. These actions may seem ordinary, even tiring. Yet the Upanishadic vision invites us to see them differently. These acts, when performed with sincerity and without selfish attachment, become a quiet form of worship. The Upanishad suggests something very beautiful. Do your duties fully, but do not let your ego cling to them. Work, love, care, and build, but remember that the deeper purpose of life is not ownership or pride. The actions belong to life itself. When we work without the constant thought of "this is mine," a subtle inner freedom begins to grow. In simple language, the teaching can be understood like this: you do not need to run away from the world to find peace. Instead, learn to live in the world without being trapped by it. A person may spend decades raising children, managing a household, and serving society. According to the Upanishadic view, this is not wasted time. These years are shaping the inner character of a human being. Patience grows when dealing with family difficulties. Compassion grows when caring for others. Humility grows when life reminds us again and again that we are not in complete control. All of these qualities slowly loosen the grip of ego. And this is where the deeper meaning of the 100-year duty appears. The Upanishad does not encourage endless worldly ambition. Instead, it invites us to fully accept the span of human life and live it consciously. If life offers us 100 years, then let those years be lived with awareness, responsibility, and inner detachment. Many misunderstand this teaching. Some think it simply encourages endless work and social duty. Others think it justifies material life without reflection. But that is not the spirit of the teaching. The emphasis is not merely on action. It is on the spirit in which action is performed. Two people may perform the same work every day. One may feel burdened, resentful, and constantly worried about recognition. The other may perform the same work quietly, seeing it as part of life's natural flow. Outwardly, their lives look identical, but inwardly they are completely different. The Upanishad is pointing toward that inner difference. Now pause for a moment and reflect on a simple question. When you finish a long day of work or family responsibilities, what remains in your heart? Is there only exhaustion and frustration? Or is there also a small sense of quiet fulfillment that you have played your role in the great rhythm of life? Sometimes the difference between these two feelings comes from a small shift in perspective. There is a story often told in Indian spiritual traditions about a humble village woman who spent her life cooking for her large family. Every day she woke before sunrise, prepared food, and served everyone before eating herself. Someone once asked her how she managed such constant work without complaint. She simply smiled and said that feeding her family felt like feeding life itself. In her heart, the kitchen had become a temple. This simple attitude reflects the spirit of the Upanishadic teaching. The home becomes a place of spiritual practice not because of rituals or ceremonies alone, but because of awareness. Washing dishes, earning money honestly, raising children with kindness. These become expressions of something sacred when done with sincerity. This is why the Upanishad encourages us to accept life rather than reject it. Running away from responsibilities does not automatically bring wisdom. Sometimes it only hides our unresolved ego. Living fully within responsibilities, on the other hand, constantly challenges our ego and softens it. Think about how family life teaches patience. A child does not always behave as expected. A spouse may have different opinions. Parents grow old and need care. These situations test our emotions again and again. But within these tests lies a quiet transformation. Slowly we learn to think beyond our own comfort. That learning is part of spiritual growth. Another misunderstanding about spirituality is the belief that spiritual realization belongs only to monks or renunciates. While renunciation has its own place, the Upanishads never dismiss the spiritual potential of ordinary life. They recognize that truth can unfold anywhere, whether in a forest hermitage or a busy household. In fact, the householder sustains society itself. Farmers, teachers, craftsmen, parents, workers. These people form the living fabric of civilization. Their efforts support the very existence of spiritual institutions and communities. The Upanishadic sages understood this deeply. Now consider another gentle reflection. Imagine a father returning home tired after a long day of work. His young child runs to greet him with excitement. For a moment, the fatigue disappears and a quiet joy appears. In that small moment, there is no calculation, no ego, no ambition. There is simply presence and affection. Could it be that such simple moments are closer to spirituality than we often realize? The wisdom of the Upanishad invites us to see life through this lens. The divine is not hidden somewhere far away. It quietly shines through the ordinary flow of living. When a person begins to understand this, something changes inside. Duties remain the same, but the inner relationship with them shifts. Work becomes participation rather than burden. Family becomes a field of love rather than possession. Life itself begins to feel meaningful in a deeper way. Chapter 9. Isha Upanishad speaks about acting in the world while renouncing the fruits of action. At first, this idea can feel confusing. If a person works hard, why should they not expect results? If someone builds something, why should they not feel proud of it? These questions are natural. But the Upanishadic insight is not asking us to stop working or stop caring. It is asking us to loosen a very subtle grip that the mind holds on outcomes. In everyday life, most of our actions are tied to expectations. We work for recognition, we help others hoping for appreciation, we build relationships hoping they will always stay the same. Slowly, without noticing, our happiness becomes tied to results. If the result appears, we feel satisfied. If it does not appear, frustration quietly enters the heart. The Upanishadic teaching gently points out that this attachment to results is the source of much inner disturbance. The problem is not action itself. The problem is the inner hunger that constantly asks, "What will I gain from this?" Renouncing the fruits of action simply means letting go of that hunger. This does not mean becoming careless or lazy. On the contrary, the teaching encourages full participation in life. Work sincerely, love sincerely, fulfill responsibilities sincerely, but allow the results to unfold in their own way. When the mind stops clinging to outcomes, a strange freedom begins to appear. Think about how much energy we spend worrying about results. A student studies not only to learn, but also to secure a particular rank. A professional works hard but constantly fears failure or comparison with others. Even acts of kindness sometimes carry a hidden expectation of recognition. Because of this, even success rarely feels peaceful. The moment one goal is achieved, another expectation rises. The mind begins chasing the next result. The Upanishadic wisdom offers a different perspective. It suggests that the world is not truly owned by anyone. Everything we experience, our abilities, opportunities, relationships, and even our breath, comes from a larger order of life. In that sense, we are not the ultimate owners of anything. We are participants in a vast unfolding. In very simple terms, the teaching says, act as a caretaker, not as a possessor. Imagine someone entrusted with maintaining a beautiful garden. The gardener waters the plants, removes weeds, and cares for the soil. But deep inside, the gardener knows the garden does not belong to them. They're simply serving it. Because of this understanding, their work becomes lighter. They care deeply for the garden, yet they do not carry the heavy burden of ownership. The Upanishadic view invites us to live life in a similar spirit. When we recognize that we are not the ultimate owners of things, attachment begins to soften. We still enjoy what life offers, but the fear of losing it slowly fades. In fact, enjoyment becomes deeper because it is no longer mixed with anxiety. There is another subtle point in the teaching. The Upanishad warns against desiring what belongs to others. In simple language, it tells us not to constantly compare our lives with someone else's life. This comparison is one of the most common sources of dissatisfaction today. Someone may have a stable job, but feels unhappy after seeing someone else's success. Someone may have a loving family, but begins to feel incomplete after comparing lifestyles. The mind keeps whispering, "I want what they have." But this constant craving quietly steals the joy of what we already possess. Renouncing the fruits of action also means letting go of this endless comparison. Instead of chasing what others have, we focus on performing our own role in life with sincerity. Now pause for a moment and reflect on something simple. Think of a time when you worked on something wholeheartedly, maybe helping someone, cooking for family, planting something in a garden, or finishing a creative project. In that moment, while you were fully absorbed in the activity, did you notice how peaceful the mind felt? Often the deepest satisfaction appears not when the result arrives, but while the action itself is unfolding. This is the quiet secret behind the teaching. There is a small story from traditional spiritual culture that illustrates this beautifully. A temple sculptor once spent years carving delicate patterns on a stone pillar. Someone asked him why he worked so carefully on parts of the pillar that would remain hidden from public view. The sculptor simply replied that the work was being offered to the divine presence, not to human eyes. Because of this attitude, the sculptor's joy was not dependent on praise or recognition. His satisfaction came from the sincerity of the work itself. This spirit captures the essence of renouncing the fruits of action. When actions are performed as offerings rather than transactions, something inside becomes lighter. Another misunderstanding about this teaching is that it asks us to suppress natural emotions. That is not its purpose. Human beings will naturally feel happiness when things go well and sadness when they do not. The teaching is not trying to erase these feelings. Instead, it encourages a deeper stability beneath them. When results come, we receive them with gratitude rather than pride. When results do not come, we learn from the experience without collapsing into despair. Gradually, life stops swinging the mind between extreme excitement and deep disappointment. A quiet balance begins to grow. This balance also changes how we enjoy the world. Normally, enjoyment is mixed with fear. We enjoy something but worry about losing it. We appreciate success but worry about maintaining it. But when attachment softens, enjoyment becomes more natural. Imagine holding sand tightly in your fist. The harder you grip, the more sand slips away. But when the hand remains open, the sand rests naturally on the palm. Life works in a similar way. The more tightly we try to control outcomes, the more restless the mind becomes. When we act sincerely but allow results to unfold naturally, life feels less heavy. Now consider a simple moment from everyday life. A mother cooks food for her family. She may spend hours preparing the meal. Yet when everyone sits together and eats with happiness, her joy does not come from ownership of the food. It comes from the act of giving itself. In that moment, the action and the joy are one. This small example reflects the deeper teaching of the Upanishad. When actions are done with the spirit of offering rather than possession, the heart naturally experiences freedom. And slowly we begin to understand something very subtle. True happiness does not come from controlling outcomes. It comes from the purity of our participation in life. When this understanding deepens, the world no longer feels like a battlefield of competition and anxiety. It begins to feel like a shared field of experience where everyone is playing their part. We still work, we still strive, we still build and create. But inside, something becomes quiet and spacious. Chapter 10. The Upanishad speaks about two kinds of knowledge, vidya and avidya. Vidya refers to the knowledge of unity. It is the understanding that behind all the differences of the world, there is a deeper oneness. It is the awareness that life is not just a collection of separate individuals, but part of a larger, living reality. This is the knowledge that spiritual traditions often point toward. Avidya, on the other hand, refers to knowledge of the world of many things. It is the knowledge needed to live, survive, build, and function in society. It includes learning skills, understanding relationships, managing work, growing food, creating systems, and solving practical problems. In simple language, vidya is spiritual understanding, while avidya is practical worldly knowledge. Many people assume that spirituality asks us to reject the world and move only toward vidya. But the Upanishadic insight is much more balanced than that. It does not dismiss worldly knowledge. Instead, it says that both forms of knowledge are necessary for a complete life. Imagine a person who only focuses on worldly knowledge. They may become very skilled, successful, and intelligent in practical matters. They may understand technology, economics, politics, and social systems. Yet if they never pause to ask deeper questions about life, meaning, or consciousness, something inside may remain restless. Even success may not bring lasting fulfillment. This is what the Upanishad describes as being lost in a certain kind of darkness, the darkness of forgetting the deeper unity of existence. But the Upanishad also gives a surprising warning about the opposite extreme. If someone focuses only on spiritual ideas and ignores the practical world completely, they may also lose balance. A person may speak beautifully about unity, meditation, or divine truth, yet fail to take responsibility for daily life. They may neglect family duties, work, or society in the name of spirituality. The Upanishad suggests that this imbalance can lead to an even deeper confusion. In other words, rejecting the world in the name of spirituality is not true wisdom either. This is why the teaching speaks about the union of vidya and avidya. To understand this, think about how human life naturally unfolds. We are born into a physical world that requires effort and learning. We must understand food, health, relationships, education, and work. Without this knowledge, survival itself becomes difficult. In that sense, avidya helps us cross the challenges of physical life. It helps us manage the world of form and change. But human beings are not satisfied by survival alone. At some point, deeper questions arise. Who am I beyond my roles? What is the meaning of life? Why does everything change? What remains constant behind these changes? These questions slowly open the door to vidya, the knowledge of unity. The Upanishadic vision suggests that a healthy life includes both dimensions. We learn how to live in the world, but we also learn how to see beyond the surface of it. This balance forms the heart of what later traditions often call karma yoga, the path of action performed with awareness. Instead of escaping the world, we participate in it while remembering the deeper unity behind it. Think about a musician playing an instrument. The musician must learn technical skills: how to hold the instrument, how to control rhythm, how to understand musical structure. These are practical forms of knowledge. Without them, music cannot be played. But music is not only technique. There is also feeling, harmony, and a deeper emotional connection that gives life to the sound. In the same way, life requires both skill and awareness. Now pause for a moment and consider a small reflection. Imagine a farmer working in the field. The farmer must understand seasons, soil, water, and seeds. Without this practical knowledge, crops cannot grow. But at the same time, the farmer may quietly feel gratitude toward nature, sunlight, rain, and the mystery of life that makes the seed sprout. One form of knowledge helps grow the crop. The other creates humility and wonder. Together, they make the farmer's life whole. This is the spirit of the teaching. When worldly knowledge and spiritual awareness move together, life becomes balanced. Work continues, responsibilities remain, and society functions. But the mind does not become completely lost in material concerns. Instead, a quiet center begins to form inside. Another misunderstanding often appears here. Some people think spiritual awareness means withdrawing from all action. They imagine that wisdom lies only in silence or meditation. But the Upanishadic view is more inclusive. It suggests that wisdom can unfold in the middle of action. A teacher explaining a lesson, a doctor helping patients, a parent caring for children, a worker building something useful. All these actions can become part of spiritual life when performed with awareness of the larger unity of existence. The outer work belongs to the world of many forms. The inner awareness belongs to the world of unity. Both move together. Now imagine a person walking on a narrow path along a riverbank. If they lean too far to one side, they may fall. Balance is what allows them to continue walking safely. In a similar way, life requires balance between worldly involvement and spiritual awareness. If we become completely absorbed in material concerns, we forget the deeper meaning of life. But if we reject the world entirely, we may lose the opportunity to express wisdom through action. The Upanishadic teaching invites us to walk between these two extremes. Here is another small moment from everyday life that reflects this idea. A school teacher may spend the day explaining mathematics or language to students. Outwardly, it is an ordinary job. But inwardly, the teacher may feel that education is helping young minds grow and shaping the future of society. The outer work belongs to the world of skills and knowledge. The inner feeling carries a sense of purpose that connects with something larger. This quiet union transforms ordinary work into something meaningful. Over time, when vidya and avidya move together, a person begins to live with both competence and wisdom. They handle practical matters efficiently while remaining inwardly aware of the deeper unity of life. The world of many things no longer feels chaotic. It becomes an expression of the one underlying reality. And slowly, something very gentle happens inside the heart. The mind stops dividing life into spiritual and worldly. Both begin to flow together naturally. Work becomes a field for awareness. Knowledge becomes a bridge between survival and wisdom. And in that quiet balance, life itself begins to feel like a harmonious movement. Many forms dancing on the surface, yet all supported by the same silent, infinite presence.